2 days before rent was due, my cousin texted me a photo of my building's front door. He wrote, "I'm here," like the city and my lease were already on his side. People imagine boundary pushers as loud, obvious takers. In real life, they float in on small assumptions. A week on your couch, a spare key for emergencies, a package sent to your address. Just this once. The cousin archetype who never quite lands his own life treats proximity as permission. He banks on your politeness more than his planning. If you've ever carried a family's unspoken favors, you know the script. Say yes now, pay for it later. I lived in a rent-stabilized one-bedroom in southeast Portland, the kind you protect like a guarded password. I was 29, a remote UX designer, and painfully good at keeping the peace. My lease was blunt. No unauthorized occupants, no subletting, no exceptions without management approval. Janice, our property manager, had told me once, "Unauthorized guests become your problem and my paperwork." Tyler knew none of that, or pretended not to. He'd been between places since spring, bouncing from Spokane couches to rideshares, a man allergic to deposits and deadlines. You might think the fix is simple, just say no. But the psychology of people like Tyler runs on borrowed urgency. They show up physically to force a decision emotionally. Your brain scrambles, protect your home, or you're standing in the family pecking order. I grew up as the reliable one, the kid who signed the group card and remembered Aunt Ellen's birthday. That training doesn't disappear when the knock comes from your own blood. I texted back, "You can't stay here," and felt my stomach knot anyway. Not fear. Anticipation of the fallout. He didn't reply. Instead, I got a call from the lobby desk. There were 5 boxes addressed to Tyler, already delivered, stacked behind the potted ficus. That's the quiet move boundary pushers make. They ship their life to your threshold because momentum embarrasses resistance. I signed for nothing, asked the front desk to hold, and took photos for my records. Back upstairs, I opened my lease to the clause I'd highlighted when I moved in. Tyler hadn't just arrived at my door. He tried to plant legal roots in my living room. My next move would decide if my apartment stayed mine or became our family's newest group project. When I finally opened my door that evening, Tyler was already leaning against the hallway wall like he owned the building. No luggage, just a backpack and that crooked grin he used when charm was supposed to cancel logistics. "Hey, cousin," he said, like we'd planned this. This wasn't just about him wanting a place to crash. Archetypes like Tyler thrive on ambiguity. He frames things as temporary, casual, almost harmless. But just a few nights, is a negotiation trap. If you let someone occupy your couch, they plant the seed that moving in is only a matter of time. And if you're someone who avoids conflict, you end up living inside someone else's decision. That's the real tension. Your silence works for them. I told him the truth. Flat, no excuses. "You can't stay here. My lease doesn't allow it." He chuckled, like paperwork was optional. "Come on, it's family. Who's gonna know?" His tone wasn't confrontational. It was conspiratorial, like he was offering me a shortcut to my own downfall. That's the cousin archetype at play. He assumes the bond overrides boundaries, that shared blood is a blanket permission slip. And here's the trick families pull on each other. You don't want to be the one who turns their back. They weaponize guilt by leaving the mess at your feet. If you've ever felt bad about protecting what's yours, you've met this dynamic. I wasn't new to it. As kids, Tyler would borrow my video games, insisting he'd return them. Weeks later, they'd show up scratched or missing, and somehow I was uptight for caring. Grow-up Tyler was running the same program with bigger stakes. I told him again, firmer this time. He shrugged, like I'd just delayed the inevitable. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through texts from my mom, his aunt. "She said you'd help me out. She said you had space." That hit differently. It wasn't just Tyler at the door now. It was the whole web of family expectations pressing from behind him. My name was already in their group chats, I realized. The story of me saying no was being written in real time. I held the line, but inside I knew this wasn't going to end with one hallway conversation. Tyler had already shipped his life here. He wasn't asking. He was staging. And staging, in situations like this, always has a second act. The next morning, I walked past the lobby desk and noticed Tyler's boxes weren't stacked neatly anymore. One was torn open, tape dangling. Inside, I saw a heap of thrift store clothes and a beat-up speaker. He hadn't asked me to bring them upstairs, but the implication was clear. The building now thought he lived here. That's how gradual takeover works. It isn't one bold move. It's a series of small defaults you don't contest fast enough. I went back upstairs and locked the deadbolt, even though I knew that wasn't the real problem. The problem was how he was already shaping the narrative. In family systems, the archetype of the drifter cousin carries a strange weight. People excuse his instability by exaggerating yours. If I resisted, I'd be painted as selfish or rigid, because it was easier to label me than hold him accountable. It's a common family dynamic. The responsible one becomes the villain when they refuse to clean up someone else's choices. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Aunt Lisa. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Honey, Tyler just needs a little breathing room. You've got that nice apartment, and you live alone. It won't kill you to share." Notice the language. Breathing room. Instead of rent. Share. Instead of surrender. Families often soften words so you'll soften your position. But the stakes weren't soft. If Tyler squatted long enough, my landlord could hold me responsible. My lease was explicit. I could lose the apartment. You might wonder why I didn't just tell the property manager right then. But there's a real fear in these situations. Fear of being seen as disloyal. Fear of triggering a chain of gossip that makes Thanksgiving unbearable. That fear is the leverage. Tyler didn't need to threaten me. He just needed me to imagine the fallout. That night, I heard a knock again. He wasn't alone this time. A friend of his, some wiry guy I didn't know, stood beside him holding another box. Tyler looked me straight in the eye and said, "This is the last of it." He was talking as if the move-in had already happened, as if my words the night before were just background noise. I stood there with the door half open, realizing I had only two choices left. Either I involved management immediately, or I let Tyler's version of reality set in. Both paths would cost me, but only one would keep my apartment mine. I closed the door on him that night, firm enough to send a message, but not so dramatic that he could claim I'd slammed it. From the peephole, I watched Tyler smirk, then casually set the new box on the hallway floor. He and his buddy walked off like they had all the time in the world. That's another tactic. You wear down the guard, create clutter that becomes normal, until resistance looks unreasonable. The psychology of it is simple. Whoever defines the situation first tends to win. Tyler wasn't fighting me head-on. He was building an alternative reality where he lived here already. Boxes in the lobby, boxes in the hallway, his name and family texts. That was the scaffolding. If I didn't dismantle it now, I'd wake up one morning in my own apartment feeling like the guest. I sat at my desk, opened my lease again, and highlighted the tenant obligations clause. I wasn't just worried about losing my space. I worked remotely, long hours on video calls. My apartment wasn't just where I lived. It was my office, my sanctuary, the one thing that kept me balanced. If Tyler moved in, that stability was gone. No quiet, no control, no clear line between my work life and his chaos. The stakes were more than rent. They were my whole rhythm. The next day, I met with Janice, the property manager. I laid it out. A cousin trying to move in, boxes already delivered. She nodded like she'd seen this 100 times. "You did the right thing coming early," she said. "Unauthorized occupants are a nightmare. If he gets in, it's harder to get him out." That word, harder, hung in the air. It wasn't impossible, but it meant legal steps, notices, maybe even eviction proceedings. And all of that would have my name attached. Still, I didn't want Tyler dragged out by management yet. I wanted one more shot at handling this myself. That evening, I called him, kept my tone calm, and said, "You need to pick up your boxes tomorrow. They can't stay here." Silence on the other end, then laughter. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," he said. That was his refrain. Minimize the problem so I'd minimize my resistance. But this time, I didn't argue. I just told him, "If you don't move them, the building will." And I hung up. My hand shook afterward, not from fear, but from the weight of finally drawing a line. What I didn't know was that Tyler had already prepared his next move, one that involved the rest of the family, and my reputation as the responsible one was about to get tested harder than ever. By the weekend, my phone was lighting up with group texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in months. The messages weren't direct attacks. just nudges wrapped in guilt. He just needs a roof for a while. Don't be so hard on him. You've always had a good heart. One even threw in, family sticks together. That's the script. Paint resistance as cruelty, cooperation as virtue. If you've ever been the reliable one, you know how quick people are to conscript your reliability for someone else's comfort. The cousin archetype isn't just about freeloading. It's about how a whole family ecosystem enables it. Tyler was the perpetual work in progress, while I was the stable cousin, and stability, in their eyes, meant I had excess. If I had an apartment to myself, I had space to give. If I had steady income, I had margin to share. It's a logic that strips boundaries down to assets. You don't get praise for holding firm. You get branded as stingy. Meanwhile, the boxes still sat in the lobby, and Janice was beginning to ask sharper questions. Are these yours or not? They can't stay here. I knew if I didn't resolve it, the building would, and once management took official steps, there was no way to keep it a quiet family dispute. That night, Tyler showed up again. No friend this time, just him, standing in the doorway with that same disarming half-smile. You know, he said, if you let me crash here, no one has to know. It'll be easier for you too. He was offering secrecy, as if breaking the lease together would bond us. That's the manipulative brilliance of people like him. They frame compromise as solidarity, making you feel guilty for wanting rules respected. I told him flat out, you're not moving in. Pick up your stuff tomorrow, or Janice is getting involved. His grin dropped for the first time. He leaned on the doorframe, voice low. If you kick me out, you're kicking out family. People won't forget that. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a threat of reputation, of being cast as the cousin who turned her back. When he finally walked off, I shut the door and sat on the couch, staring at my phone buzzing with new notifications. The texts were multiplying, cousins and aunts chiming in, weaving the story in real time. Tyler wasn't just trying to move into my apartment. He was trying to move into the family narrative as the victim. And the next morning, that narrative showed up not through him, but through my own mother. My mom called just after breakfast, her voice carrying that mix of concern and disappointment I knew too well. Honey, Tyler says you're shutting him out. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. Notice the framing. Not that he refused to save money, not that he'd bounce from place to place by choice, but that I was the one shutting him out. That's how guilt works in families. The story flips so fast you start doubting the facts. I told her the truth, that my lease forbade it, that he'd already sent boxes here without asking, that I could lose my apartment. She sighed, long and heavy. I know, but you've always been the strong one. Can't you bend just a little? The archetype of the responsible child was in full swing. In every family system, someone gets cast as the caretaker, and once you're in that role, people stop seeing your boundaries as real. They see them as obstacles to be negotiated down. When I pushed back, Mom got quieter. I just don't want this to tear everyone apart. That was the hook. If I said no, I wasn't just protecting my lease, I was allegedly putting the family bond at risk. And that's the trap. You're forced to choose between your own stability and the illusion of family harmony. I hung up feeling drained, not because I doubted my decision, but because I knew the campaign had escalated. Tyler wasn't fighting for a roof. He was fighting to avoid the mirror of his own choices. If I said no, he'd have to face them. If I caved, I'd carry them. That's the dynamic with drifters. They hand you the weight of their life and dare you to set it down. That afternoon, Janice emailed me formally. These packages must be removed within 48 hours. She copied the building supervisor. It wasn't just about Tyler anymore. It was about my standing as a tenant. I forwarded the email to Tyler with one line. Pick them up by Friday. His response was immediate. If you won't let me in, I'll come get them myself. The tone was sharp, not playful. For the first time, he sounded cornered. And people who feel cornered often make one last, reckless move. I had no idea what form his would take, but I felt the air tightening, like the real standoff was only days away. Friday came, and the boxes were still sitting in the lobby. Janice's patience was gone. She left me a voicemail that was all clipped words and procedure. If these aren't collected today, we'll have them removed at cost to you. The pressure had shifted fully onto me. That's the tactic. When someone refuses responsibility long enough, the system forces whoever is closest to step in. Tyler knew it. He was betting I'd blink first. At noon, I walked down and stood over the pile. 5 boxes, one ripped open, the other slouched like tired furniture. I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring, his voice too casual. "Yeah?" I told him the deadline. He chuckled. "Relax, I'll swing by later." That was Tyler's rhythm. Delay, deflect, dismiss. He survived by making urgency your problem, not his. By 3, I was pacing my apartment. I couldn't work. Every ping from Slack felt like background noise against the louder hum of dread. At 4, I got a text from Aunt Lisa again. "Don't you dare throw out his stuff. He'll be there soon." It was a relay now. Tyler using family as his mouthpiece, making me the villain in a play I hadn't auditioned for. 5:30, he finally showed. I saw him through the lobby glass, sauntering in with that half grin. But instead of grabbing the boxes, he marched straight to the front desk. I watched him lean over the counter, gesturing toward the packages, then up toward the ceiling like he was pointing out my unit. The concierge glanced at me nervously, caught between tenant and interloper. Tyler was trying to script the scene publicly, to make it look like he was the rightful resident collecting his own things. I walked down, heart steady but voice clear. "These aren't yours to leave here. Take them now." His grin faltered just slightly, but he doubled down. "She's just being difficult. My aunt already said I could stay here." That sentence landed like a grenade. He wasn't appealing to the lease, the rules, or even logic. He was appealing to family authority, spoken in a building that didn't care about it. The concierge looked at me, waiting. In that moment, it was obvious. Either I stood firm, or Tyler would walk right past me with a box in his arms, planting his claim deeper. I opened my phone, pulled up Janice's email, and placed it on the counter. "Management says they're removed today. By you?" Tyler's jaw tightened. For the first time, charm wasn't working. But when charm fails, people like him don't surrender, they escalate. And as he bent to pick up a box, he muttered just loud enough for me to hear. "You'll regret this." He hauled the first box out to the curb, leaving the others stacked in the lobby like a dare. The concierge glanced at me again, eyebrows raised, as if to ask if he should call security. I shook my head. Tyler wasn't violent. His power came from spectacle. He wanted a scene, something messy enough to turn into another story for the family thread. If I lost my cool, he'd win by default. The psychology here was textbook. When charm fails, the boundary pusher leans on escalation to test whether your resolve is real. He doesn't need to move all the boxes. He just needs to stall, to show that you'll bend before he does. It's a contest of endurance, not reason. I stood there until he came back in. "Grab the rest," I said. My voice was calm, but I kept my phone in hand, camera app open. That tiny gesture changed the energy. He noticed, scowled, then dragged out 2 more boxes. Halfway through the 3rd trip, he switched tactics. "You know," he said, puffing with effort, "Mom's already talking about you. Says you've turned cold. Says you forgot where you came from." There it was again, family reputation as leverage. The boxes weren't just physical weight. They were props in a moral performance. By 7, the lobby was finally clear. Tyler loaded the last of his things into a borrowed SUV, slammed the trunk, and shot me a look that was equal parts anger and disbelief. "You made your choice," he said. "Not thanks, not goodbye, just that." Then he peeled out, tires screeching like he needed the sound to prove something. I went upstairs and exhaled for what felt like the first time all week. My apartment was quiet again, but it didn't feel like victory. My phone was still buzzing. Cousins, aunts, even my mom asking why I'd been so harsh. Tyler had already painted his version of the story, and I was the villain in it. That night, I sat on the couch and thought about how easily responsibility gets twisted. The drifter cousin archetype thrives because families mistake boundaries for betrayal. You become the one who changed, while the one who never changes escapes consequence. It wasn't fair, but it was familiar. Then, just before midnight, a new text came in, not from Tyler, but from Janice. "We need to talk Monday morning. This situation isn't over." My stomach tightened again. I had won the skirmish, but the building, and maybe even my lease, was still on the line. Monday morning, I walked into Janice's office with a knot in my stomach. She had the kind of expression landlords reserve for tenants who brought trouble to their doorstep. Measured, but clearly annoyed. "We can't have this again," she said. "Packages, visitors, someone trying to move in without paperwork. It's a liability for the building. If this repeats, you could be in violation of your lease." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had fought to keep the rules intact, but I was still on the hook because Tyler had chosen me as his stage. That's the psychology of boundary pushers. They don't just drain you emotionally, they spread the cost to anyone connected. Your relationships, your reputation, your housing stability, all of it becomes collateral. And the system, whether it's family or property management, usually wants the fastest resolution, not the fairest one. I explained everything, showed the screenshots of texts, the email trail, even the photos of the boxes. Janice softened a little. "You did the right thing documenting. Keep doing that. If he tries again, call us immediately. We'll treat him as a trespasser." That word, trespasser, hit me hard. It meant the building saw what my family refused to, that Tyler wasn't just a cousin, he was someone crossing lines that weren't his to cross. Still, the fallout at home was harsher. By midweek, Aunt Lisa called, furious. "You embarrassed him, made him feel unwanted. He's family." That refrain was endless. Family, family, family. As if the word alone settled the argument. But in every family system, someone has to decide whether loyalty means protecting bonds or protecting boundaries. And once you choose the latter, you get cast as the outsider. I kept my responses short. "He can't live here. That's final." It wasn't defiance. It was survival. The truth was, I didn't know if Tyler would try again. He'd always been more persistent than resourceful, and persistence sometimes masquerades as inevitability. That Friday, as I returned from groceries, I found an envelope slid under my door. No name on it, just folded paper inside. I unfolded it carefully, half expecting an official notice. Instead, it was a handwritten note from Tyler. Just 2 lines. "You think you won, but I'm not done." The handwriting was messy, rushed, and as I held it, I realized this wasn't just about my apartment anymore. Tyler had turned it into something bigger, his battle to prove he couldn't be shut out, no matter what it cost either of us. I stood in my kitchen staring at that note, its ink smudged like it had been written in the parking lot before he drove off. It wasn't a legal threat, and it wasn't violent, but it was Tyler's signature style, vague enough to sound ominous, pointed enough to unsettle me. People like him rely on that ambiguity. If you feel uneasy, you start second-guessing yourself. Maybe you overreacted. Maybe you should have just given in. That creeping doubt is part of their power. I didn't let it grow this time. I slipped the note into a folder with the rest of the screenshots, emails, and photos, then typed up a timeline of everything that had happened. Documentation wasn't just about protecting myself legally. It was about reminding myself that I wasn't crazy, that there was a real sequence of events, not just Tyler's spin. The next morning, I called my mom. I didn't plead my case or ask for backup. I simply said, "This has gone too far. He sent me a note. I won't discuss this again." She was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "I'll talk to him." I could tell she still thought I was being harsh, but she finally understood I wasn't wavering. That was the shift. When boundary pushers realize their usual channels won't bend you, they eventually stop pushing. Over the following weeks, the texts slowed, the calls stopped, and the group chat turned back to birthday plans and football scores. Tyler disappeared back into his drifting pattern, couch hopping in another city. The family still made little comments. "You know how he is, poor guy." But I no longer felt the tug to fix it. I'd learned that being the responsible one didn't mean being endlessly available. It meant holding firm when no one else would. My apartment stayed quiet. The boxes were gone, the lease intact, my work uninterrupted. But the silence carried a new weight, not fear, not guilt, just clarity. Families will always have their archetypes. The drifter, the caretaker, the enabler. You can't rewrite them, but you can refuse the role they script for you. So yes, my cousin tried to move into my apartment while I was still living there. And yes, it nearly cost me my home, my peace, and my reputation. But in the end, I kept what was mine. The victory wasn't loud or flashy. It was simply the steady knowledge that this time, I hadn't blinked.